Dave's. Dave and David.
Yes.
David and Dave.
Yes.
Hi. I'm surrounded by Dave's, David, and Dave's, Dave. I think it's pronounced David's General.
Yes.
Yes.
How you're supposed to say it's the plural. Welcome everyone to Apex Adjacent. Dave is over there.
Hello.
And David is over there. We have our good friend David Obuchowski back on the show.
Friend of the show.
I think officially now, friend of the show.
Well, thank you. I feel like that's a bit of a promotion. I'm happy to have a promotion.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to be here. I love seeing you guys. In person even now.
Yeah,
but I
it's
love
great.
being on the show.
Great to see you.
Fun.
Yeah. So, car show, right?
Car show. That's not a COVID cough.
Oh God, are you okay?
I'm fine. But apparently COVID has not canceled colds. And the children still get them and they still give them to you constantly. There's just cold germs constantly coming at your face because of the children. So anyways, I make coffee.
Adorable little petri dishes.
Exactly. Yep. So I don't want anyone to be alarmed. And anyways, this is all virtual, as I'm sure most of your viewers and listeners are smart enough to know this is not an in-person conversation.
COVID is digital now. Not a lot of people know that.
Yeah, that's the next variant you can just attach to an email.
Yeah.
You know, right.
Yeah, that's the Giga variant.
Oh, yeah, the Gigacron. So I promised just a quick Steve Albini story, which has nothing to do with cars. But there was a remark that, one of you just could turn up the smart knob, to make the other sound better. So back in 2002, I'm going to say 2002, I was living in Chicago very briefly. And I had this little band. Again, it was very brief because I barely lived there more than I was like a year or something, maybe not even, right before I moved to New York. So went into electrical audio and recorded, not with Steve Albini, but with his sort of right-hand man, Greg Norman, who's awesome. And I met Steve Albini when we were there a couple times, and he's sort of very dry kind of a guy. And of course, I love Steve Albini. I love his bands and all that stuff. And, and I know his reputation as being not sort of a warm and fuzzy guy. So
right.
I generally kept my distance and just sort of said hi. And, Greg was, really, really friendly and all that stuff. And so I bring home the sort of reference mix from the studio. And I'm listening to it on the CD, and I'm like, oh, this is like pretty good. It sounds a little thin, like it feels like the bass could come up a little bit. Now this is all analog recording, right? So, you're recording on a thick tape, and then they have to put it back on the machine, and so I call over to Electrical Audio, hoping to get Greg on the phone to just ask him, like, hey, can we do a quick mix? Just kind of bump the bass up, and Greg's not there, and Steve Albini answers. And I'm like, he's like, what do you want? Like, that's just like general tone, right?
Right.
And I'm like, well, like, I love how it sounds, everything. It just sounds a little thin. I'm thinking maybe like turning the bass up might help it kind of like thicken it up. I'm totally intimidated because I'm on the phone with Steve Albini at this point, right?
Right.
And so I'm probably not speaking as clearly as I could be, which is just to say the bass isn't loud enough. I'd like to get a mix with the bass louder. So he's like, well, what do you mean? Like, what's the problem with it? And I'm like, well, I just feel like it'd be like more powerful, like it could be like thicker, And I start getting these sort of more abstract terms, And he just is on the phone and he just goes, I don't have a fucking knob to turn to make you suck less. I mean, it's not a direct quote, but it was something like exactly like, and I will never forget the vision of him just being like there's not a knob, that says like, good. That you can just turn it up. And I was just like, wow, cancel the mix request. I think I'm done,
I found out I had a speaker unplugged.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds better
you know
now.
what? Actually, it sounds fine. I think I'm going to go into hiding for a while.
Big Black Songs for Fucking is my favorite album.
Oh yeah, no, that record is amazing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I loved Atomizer, and yeah, and then I moved out of Chicago. Pure coincidence, I assure you, not because I was completely scorched by Steve Albini.
What kind of car would Steve Albini drive?
That was going to be my question too.
No way.
That's a great question. I mean, so
it's got to be something that says just don't talk to me.
Right.
Yeah, like isn't there part of you that feels like he would drive a Saab? Don't you think that he would drive like something that's like it's got style and it's kind of angular and cold, kind of like the music. Like I feel like Shellac's music and Big Black, like there is a sort of angularness to it and it's kind of cold like Saab. It's speed. It could be kind of, and it's also a little unapproachable. Like Saabs are kind of scary if you don't know them.
Right.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I think where that analogy falls apart is I think most Saab owners are very excited to talk about their Saabs.
Oh, right.
And I feel like Steve Albini wouldn't want to talk about his car, right? He would just need to be there and you get it.
Yeah.
We don't need to talk about it.
I mean, he's also like, I don't think it could be anything like you're like from the big three because that's just too straight up the middle for Steve Albini. He has this weird thing where he hates Canadians. I think that's probably more of a running joke than anything. He's got this like anti-Canada thing, really? Which is kind of funny to me. But like, would he just drive like maybe like a late 70s Honda? Just because that's just like beat up.
Yeah, right. Like
kind of duct taped together.
Like it just gets the job done.
Yeah, where like the mechanic is like, the head gasket is disintegrated. And he's like, I don't give a shit. Just make it. I just need to get from
my house to the studio.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Like maybe that's what Steve Albini would drive.
So,
but like Steve Albini is like a huge baseball fan. So that's the other thing is like you have this idea like where you're like, oh, this guy's going to be like this, like Warhol-esque in some ways, like artist. And then he comes to the studio and he's like, is the game on? Like puts the game, and he's like, if he's not like at the game, he's watching the game. And the dude is like actually quite approachable. I think if you're not trying to talk to him about music, if you're just like, what's going on with the fucking Cubs this year? He's probably like, yes, let's talk about the Cubs. So,
gotcha.
And maybe an AMC Eagle.
Oh, okay.
Boom.
Yeah.
I just threw that out. Shit.
I like it.
He was on a Reddit AMA and somebody asked him, how in the world did you end up producing Peter Soro's album Buyer's Market? What was Peter like? Steve Albini answered and said, Peter's an old friend. I've known him for 30 years or so. I'd help him do whatever he wants to do, from wash his car to edit his album. So that was the only car reference I could find for Steve Albini.
So, but he would wash a car, Steve Albini.
Yeah.
Do you think he'd wash his own car? I doubt.
No, he would not wash his own car.
No.
I do like that we've done a hot 20 on Steve Albini. And
yeah.
I'm going to say probably half of our audience has no idea who he is.
I'm going to say, maybe.
Well, okay, just as a closing thing, to this is my very
Let's
graceful
put a bow
segue.
on Albini.
Here's my eloquent segue from Albini into cars. When you go to Electrical Audio, what you notice is that everyone who works there wears jumpsuits. They wear, much like Dave, you wore when we were working on the Peugeot together.
Hell yeah, you got to have your speed suit, man.
Yeah, I mean, it reads a little bit more Devo-esque in the context of Electrical Audio, but still, I mean, you could. I guess I'm stretching, but I think I've gotten there. I think I've made the point. Look, my metaphors. There's not a fucking knob that you can turn up my metaphors and make them suck less. Okay.
Hey, when those guys are there, they have work to do. When you're in the garage, you've got work to do, and also you want it to be a challenge if you have to pee real quick.
Yes, well, that's like his whole thing too, right? Of like he's a technician, not an artist, right?
He's not a producer.
Yeah, he's a technician, engineer. I can't remember what he calls himself, but yeah, something like that.
engineered by. Yeah, right. Because you're like, you got all these kids. I don't even know if anyone gives a shit anymore about like produced by Steve Albini. But back in the day, I mean, in the 90s, you were like, hey, I got a band. I'm going to buy a day's worth of time at Electrical Audio and say it was produced by Steve Albini. And he was like, no, you're not. You're not saying it was produced by me.
Yeah.
You can say that you paid me to like, boop, plugged in a cable, hit record. Cool. Anyways.
Listen to the drums on In Utero, everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, so should we start talking about cars?
Sure.
All right.
Let's do it.
Okay. I
love cars. Actually, I'm really excited to talk about cars because, as you guys know, I acquired quite literally, and I know this is a sort of a term that gets bandied about. This is quite literally a dream car, like a lifelong dream car. And I didn't have a lot of dream cars. I was not a person who had this like long list of like specific, but this is a dream car.
So the last time you were on the show, you had an Alfa Romeo.
Mm-hmm.
Remind the people the details of the Alfa Romeo and the diamond plating and the whole thing.
Right. So I had this total weirdo, bizarro 1979 Alfa Romeo sports sedan. It's an Alfetta. So it's a sort of a sibling or a cousin of the GTV. And there it is.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of the opposite of the dream car in that, not that it was a nightmare. However, I never knew this car existed. I couldn't have dreamt of this car because quite literally, I only became hip to its existence the day that I saw it posted on Craigslist and went directly to look at it. And from the outside, I was like, this car is really cute, and it's an Alfa Romeo, and I think Alfas are great. This is a unique one. Went over there. It was priced very low, which was important.
Right.
And was like, seems to be like in good working order, and was rebuilt by an Alfa mechanic. Opened the door. Instead of interior like door cards, it's aluminum diamond plate. There it is.
Yep.
And I mean, metal. This is not like some plasticky stuff designed to look cool. This is the real deal. It is sheet metal and hot to the touch. In the summertime, it's like driving in a fucking microwave. And total Frankenstein of a car. Excuse me, Frankenstein's monster, to be literally correct. Yes, exactly. So it is a 79 car with an 87 engine. Oh, look at that rust. Beautiful. And I added the stripes myself. Unable to actually fix anything at this point, I went ahead and put stripes on. I needed to do something.
It draws your eye. The nice thing about the stripes is that it really draws your eye to the rust.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, totally. So yeah, 87 Spider engine. So it had EFI, which was cool, and it had those taillights are from the 71 Spider. It had all kinds of. The seats were from a Milano. But like it's totally weird, one of a kind, bizarre car that was more reliable than it should have been. Not that it didn't give me problems. It gave me enough problems for me to learn.
There you go.
And not so many that it made me be like, fuck this. I will never try this again.
Right.
And it was very, very fun to drive. And a huge downside of it was that because 79 car, it didn't have 3-point seatbelts in the back. So it just had lap belts. Well, I'm thinking to myself, how hard could it be to install 3-point seatbelts, right? Because I have two young kids who are now 7 and 10. Back then they were 5 and 8 or 6 and 9 or whatever. And so I go on Amazon. There's not many 3-point seatbelts you could just buy. But I found the one company that did, bought them, took the seats out and really forced them in there, and it was a shit show. I mean, it was not like, don't hire me to install aftermarket seatbelts in your car. Don't hire me to take your vintage car and update it with seatbelts, because first of all, I will destroy the little interior I've left. If you, like me, have a car that's mostly aluminum diamond plate and there's a little headliner left, that shit will come down. When I get done with it, it will be torn and everything. And then also it just didn't really fit well. It didn't really hold well. And there was this, it was not great.
Yeah.
So it wasn't super safe for the kids between the shrapnelizing interior and the seatbelts that were really more for show than anything.
Right.
But I didn't put them in it too much. And then we moved from LA to Colorado. We're in Denver. And of course, in Denver, if you park your car on the curb, the catalytic converter just disappears, which is a cool feature that we have here in Denver.
Yeah.
It's sort of like we have a really good recycling program and composting, and it's almost like an automated catalytic converter recycling program that you don't even pay for or register for. Yeah. You move to Denver, you just park your car and your catalytic converter is taken care of. It's not a problem. And so our Prius, which was the family car we did drive the kids around in, we had it on the curb and catalytic converter went away. And of course, this is, the catalytic converters are backordered for roughly 3 decades and they, cost $8 million. And so suddenly the Alfa Romeo gets put into the spec. Like, congratulations, you're the family car now.
I love how it takes like a Toyota Prius with basically an open header, which has to sound unique.
I drove it to the shop. And it was amazing. First of all, it was alarmingly loud.
Well, and it's got to be bizarre, right? Because our engine RPM doesn't necessarily have a whole lot to do with your throttle position, right? So is it just very bizarre of like it's loud and then it's quiet because then the battery kicks in? Exactly.
Well, so it was 2009 Prius. So our car really was more like. It didn't really like cut into electronic mode while you were driving. I mean, I think there was electronic assist, but it was sort of engine on until you stopped. And I had been told that for some cars, if you get rid of the catalytic converter, it actually becomes a little bit more powerful. Mm-hmm. Our Prius, that was not the case. I mean, I did sound like I took it out on the interstate and saw how fast it would go, but it was more sluggish off the line. It was really fucking loud. And and then you would stop at a red light. So I'm on Quebec or something like that, or MLK, and stopped at a red light. And this like truck pulls up next to me, and I'm on my little Prius. And the guy in the truck is looking at me like, lame fucking Prius driver. The light turns green, and I hit the gas. And the dude's just like, what? I'm looking at him like, it's right. Straight pipe this bitch. Totally not driving it to the shop. This is how I roll. And
this is my life now.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so the Alpha was like all of a sudden, and it was summer, so the interior again not comfortable.
Yeah.
And I had some problems with the old water pump, which I did replace on my own, very proud of. Anyway.
Yeah. And you should be.
Yeah. My wife was very supportive. She was like, it's not safe for the kids. So I don't like that we're driving them in this car, which I was like, agreed. And she was like, this car was not meant to be like a forever car. It was like your first like special old car.
Cut your teeth.
Yeah. And she was like, maybe you weren't planning on upgrading today, but maybe you need to upgrade today. And so I was like, man, you're right. Well, anyways, it was a sort of this lucky thing because right when that was happening, my Twitter friend, Steve, who you guys spoke to, and he just happened to be like, hey, I found this Peugeot listed locally. And I was just like, okay, that's my dream car. There's no fucking way in the world this would ever work, right? Like, so there's my dream car in Montana. Meanwhile, my Prius is out of commission.
Right.
I have an Alpha that like it needs some work on it.
And burns children.
Yeah, right. It can't. Right. It can't work, and yet it did. And we write more extensively about that. Steve and I co-authored an essay. Hopefully, that will be coming out soon. And we write a little bit more about that. But it was just totally one of those long shot things where at every step you're almost like, "What's the point of me even taking the 10 minutes it's going to take to write this message, or to take this phone call, or to do this?" Because obviously this could never work, and yet at every step it did.
Okay. Okay.
And so, a few months ago, I found myself on a plane, a one-way ticket, and landed in Missoula, and I got picked up in my Peugeot 405 Mi16, 1989. It's crazy.
It is. It sounds like a whirlwind, and I want to rewind just a touch.
Yes.
So this is a completely safe place. Anybody, like the fact that you can say a Peugeot 405 Mi16 is your dream car. I love that. We love that, right? And that is fantastic, right? Because like there's enough people that want McLarens. There's enough people that want these things, right? But like it's unique. It's something like you've identified. Like what took you to that being one of your dream cars, and what else is kind of in the rankings? Like what are its peers as David Obuchowski dream cars? Well,
so that's a good question. And I think for this essay, I didn't have an opportunity to really get into that as much.
Okay.
And part of it is because it's hard to articulate. I have always loved Peugeots. I mean, like, when I was a kid and I've always loved cars, but I've always been I like them actually similarly, probably. I mean, my son loves cars right now. Part of that has to do with me because I love cars, but like, I think he's attracted to them and drawn to them much in the same way that I was. So even if I wasn't really into cars, I have a feeling he still would be. He loves the way they look. He's sort of fascinated by it. How they work seems kind of mysterious. They go really fast. They look all different kinds of ways. And so I sort of always loved cars as a kid. And there was always something kind of, and just for context, I was born in 1979. They stopped selling Peugeots in the U.S. in 91, I think. I think that was the year, or that was the last model year. Yeah. So it was either 91 or 92 that the Peugeots officially, were done. So, you got to figure I'm 12 or 13 years old when that happens. Lived on the East Coast. So there was a lot of Peugeots out there, 505s almost entirely.
Right.
Beautiful, just beautiful car. And I always felt like the Peugeot 505 is probably it just struck me as being, everyone sort of talked about like the BMWs and the Mercedes as these being like really classy cars. And I was just like, man, this Peugeot 505 is like, to me, it's just like that, except it's got so much more character. Anyways, getting older and sort of learning a little bit more about cars. When I moved to LA, before I got the Alpha, I hung out with Andrew from Car Bibles from the Drive,
Yeah.
And I was like, the first thing I was like, I want to get a car. I want to get a Peugeot. I told him that, and I didn't. There's none for sale. They don't come up ever. So anyways, the 505, learning sort of about the cars, you kind of learn that like the 505 is beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's sort of like, to me, you just can't look at that car. Look at the headlights. But they're not, then you look at like the 405, especially the 405 Mi16, and you're talking about, well, the 505 wasn't exactly like a speed demon.
Right.
And the ones that you did find in the US, a lot of them were diesels, which is cool in its own way. But the 405 and the Mi16 version is this like a whole other beast. It doesn't have your sort of Mercedes, BMW luxury car look necessarily. It's got a more aggressive look. It's designed by Pininfarina, so it actually looks like, it's got a little bit of that Alfa Romeo look. And it's the MI16 has that spoiler, which gives it even more. And then, the thing redlines at 7,200 RPM. So again, going back to my teenage years when it was like the VTEC thing was all the rage. It was like, oh, these things redline at 7,800 RPM or whatever it is. I don't know the exact amount, but like it's like really high revving. Well, this car is not VTEC, but it still behaves like that. Like it's difficult to get into fifth gear because that thing just wants to go really just stay in the high revs. And when we were driving it from Montana back to Denver, you know, you'd have these long stretches of road where you obviously get into fifth gear and the speedometer goes up to 140 miles an hour. And I mean, that thing was like effortlessly getting up to 100, like barely getting out of fourth. You know, it's just like, you just got this feeling where you're like, this thing is, if I wanted to really push it, it would go really fast. And unlike the Alpha, which would become sort of terrifying around 70 miles an hour, that car was fun, but it was also scary to drive. Like the sort of dichotomy of the Alfa Romeo driving experience, at least that car was, and I'd be curious if it's other old Alphas, was on one hand, you desperately want to just go really fast in it and just really open the thing up. And then as soon as you do, you're like, holy shit, this thing is driving me. I am not really driving it, you know, like.
Well, like you said, the Alpha was a cousin of the GTV, which was essentially it took its lineage from a car that was designed in like the 50s.
Right.
So, and this is like a relatively modern car.
And it feels like it. Yeah. And I mean, I have not gotten this car up to a speed where it has felt even remotely like out of control. Right. It's that, you know, where you're driving a car and you're like, this is deceptively fast. You know, you kind of like, you blink and you're like, holy shit, I'm doing 95 in this thing. It doesn't feel like it. The Peugeot is a little bit like that. It doesn't feel like the car is struggling. It wants to go fast. It wants to be high up in the revs. And so that was the kind of thing, was sort of learning about the 505 versus the 405. And then of course, like, you know, you see like the Peugeot hot hatches over in Europe and those things are kind of legendary. Right. And I think this is sort of, you know, probably is more like your sedan version of that. Anyway, always wanted a Peugeot. They're just different. There's something mysterious about them. You just never see them.
Yeah.
You're like, is it like a super like luxury car? Like, is it like an Audi or, and then on the other hand, you're like, or is it this like weird car that is not like that at all? And I think it's like in the States, it exists sort of in both worlds. And I think in particular, the Mi16 was Peugeot's like last shot in America of coming in and being like, maybe we can like really compete. In fact, I'll send you guys a picture if you don't already have it. This car came with so much cool shit, including the original accessories catalog, which includes a t-shirt, which I would love to track down, of a lion chasing like these other animals, like this huge lion, right? And it's chasing down like BMW and Audi and Porsche, right? And it's like, it says, you won't even find the shirt online. You will not find it. You know, and it says something along the hang on, I can get it for you. You want me to get it for you?
Drive the Lion-Hearted Peugeot Estates?
Nope.
No? Okay.
Hang on, I'll be right back. I have it just in the other room.
Okay, there's the shirt.
Okay, so, and here I was a smartass, and I crossed out Saab, Dave, because Saab is no longer in business, and I replaced it with Tesla.
Thank you.
But anyway, yeah, so this shirt to me truly represents the what the 405 Mi16 was supposed to do in the US, right?
Okay.
And I don't know, I mean, it was like a really successful car elsewhere in the world, like highly successful. But in the States, it sort of was like gone before it really even got here. It was hardly here. But this shirt to me was like, this was their vision board, right? Like the Peugeot just fucking devouring like BMW and Volvo and Audi and Saab.
I love that marketing attitude, and it's always so interesting because there was a little bit of that from Saab. Like Saab was kind of labeled an entry-level luxury car.
Yeah.
Right? And so like your Peugeot kind of falls into that, but kind of more to the sport side. Right.
Well, what I was thinking was what's really funny about this is that they were basically going after like 12 people in the US who were cross-shopping the 405 Mi16 and the Mercure like XR4 or whatever.
Right.
Like those were the two cars. They were both competing for the same like dozen people.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's the Stellantis issue right now. I was all excited a couple years ago when it was like, Peugeot is going to come back. They're going to be back in North America 2025 or something like that, right? That was the sort of rough plan that they had announced. And then Stellantis, I guess, I don't know, formed or whatever. And then they were like, not happening. And my kids were like, they're like, why isn't Peugeot? And I'm just like, because like the person who's going to drive who's going to buy a Peugeot is like the same one who's going to buy the fucking like the Fiat or the Alfa Romeo or like, It's just like, how many people in the US really are going to be like, oh, cool, a Peugeot, I'm going to buy that.
Yeah, right. that like space is so incestual, right? Yeah, like from a customer standpoint, right?
But they went for it. There was this like a moment where they were like, we're taking them. We're taking out BMW. Right. We're taking out Volvo. This image of the Peugeot lion gobbling up these brands, to me, I'm just like, that is awesome.
There's your next tattoo.
I know, totally. Like there is some alternate timeline, where COVID didn't happen, but Peugeot, like they came out with the 405 Mi16, and just fucking Volvo doesn't exist anymore.
Right. Nobody ever put pineapple on pizza.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Now we're talking.
Yeah. Anyway, so this is I don't know. There's something about it. It's sideways. It's it's hard to find parts for it, but it's also not like totally impossible. What's his name? Who has the Renault? He's in Weird Car Twitter. He was just tweeting about it. I can't remember his name. That's embarrassing. Anyway, he's like totally struggled because his car needs a new transmission, and he like finally sourced it after months and months and months, and it's like it's a miracle I ever found anything. And I was kind of like, that's going to be my big challenge with this car.
Right.
And like, there's some stuff that's kind of hard to get, but then it's also not impossible. The fact is they made like 3 million of these cars. Right. They made like 3 million Peugeot 405s.
Wow. Okay.
So, I mean, are you going to find it in Denver? Probably not. You're probably not going to find the part in Denver, but there is a dude in Dallas or Texas somewhere that has a bunch of French car parts. But then also it's easy, kind of easy to like find shit in England or Germany and all that stuff. So it hasn't been quite, it's intimidating, but owning the car has been like, I can do this. I can do it, a little bit like the Alpha.
Well, and you had you found a really great example of it.
Yeah.
We heard some of the story from Steve, like you said, but my big question is, what do your kids think about it? Do either of them miss the Alpha? Or are they all on board with the
okay, so you see that picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is what I would consider I'm not a professional photographer, but I think this is a decent picture that I took of the car.
Sure.
In the beginning, especially, there was only 4 pictures of the car. It was not a lot. And the kids loved the Alpha, despite the fact that it was not I didn't even want to drive them around in it, but they loved the Alpha.
Right.
And they also get very attached to things. And I was like, I'm going to sell the car. And they were in tears when that Alpha drove away. And I hugged my kids, and I was like, you know what? it's pretty rare when daddy is like gets rid of a car and it's running. Like this is sad, but it's also happy.
Right.
Like, you know, but I was showing them pictures. I was like, this is Peugeot, which of course they've never heard of Peugeot. And I'm like, check it out. And they see basically like this white sedan.
Right.
And they're just like, not that the Alpha wasn't a sedan too, but you look at the Alpha, you're like, what's that? You know? And they kind of looked at this and they were like, oh, like,
it looks like a car that I drew.
Right. Like, it's just like a car, you know?
Right.
In the very beginning of owning the Peugeot, the first few weeks, I would be driving my kids to school or wherever, and my daughter would see like a fucking Honda and she would be like, a Peugeot! And I'd be like, Alma, that's not a Peugeot. Like, don't hurt daddy's feelings. You know?
Do you see why daddy's crying? It's because of what you said. It's because of what you said, daughter.
Yeah.
Never forget this.
but now they're like all about it. I mean, they love this car. I mean, you know, okay, like my wife and I switch on and off who picks them up, who takes them to school, picks them up from school. And they're just like, you know, are you going to pick me up in the Peugeot? Are you going to pick us up in the Peugeot? Can we take the Peugeot? Which I'm, you know, like 99% of the time, I'm like, hell yeah, we could take the Peugeot. You got it. So, and it's great because the kids are old, like big enough, they don't have to be in car seats anymore. So,
yeah, there you go. That's a good
they
age.
kind of hop in.
Yep.
And the seatbelts work. It's safer.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And it is like, I think they're like, this is more comfortable.
Okay.
And it's still a manual. My son thinks manuals are the fucking coolest things in the world.
Okay.
Because he keeps saying they're like spaceships. He's like, in his mind, he's like, this is what a spaceship sounds like. Because, you know, you get in the Prius or any other car and you just step on the gas and the car is just like, it's just constantly staying at that, you know.
Right.
2,300 RPM, like sip the gasoline thing, what the computer says. And then you get in this and you want to have some fun, and it's like, and my son is just like, yes, that is the coolest sound ever. You know, it's not going down.
Yeah.
And then I switch the gears and he can like feel it. He's like, oh my God. So, and my daughter, she's 7. The other day, she was like, Daddy, will you teach me how to drive stick on your Peugeot? Which I was like, okay.
As soon as it stops raining on daddy's face for a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Daddy's going to need to source a clutch first, but yes.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Hey, so something kind of occurred to me, right? Like when you have a pet and children, like, you know, at some point you're going to be teaching your children about loss, right?
Yeah.
And I think that one thing that we always touch on is kind of the full spectrum of the automotive ownership experience, right? Grief is absolutely part of that, right? Like I went through it so much with my Vigan, with the Saab I had before, like all of these real emotions that kind of come up around like the arcs that we have with these vehicles, right? And like seeing how your kids like reacted to the Alpha departing and then kind of the new, like the Peugeot coming in, and like seeing those like emotional kind of like journeys like through their eyes has to be something that's really interesting.
It is. I mean, it's definitely like, you know, my dad has a saying, we talks about like, you know, he's kind of one of those guys like, oh, there's an old saying, you know, and one of the things that he's like, there's an old saying, you know, never love anything that can't love you back, you know, and talking about like, don't get too attached to the material of your house, a car, whatever. But I'm like, it's complicated, and I get that. And I think it's actually something to aspire to. Mm-hmm. But you can love the experiences, right? And so I do think that there is, and I saw it with the Alpha. Like, the Alpha was emblematic not only of, like, well, it not only was like we had experiences in it. It was, you know, it was this like thing that they really liked, and every once in a while we'd get in the car. But it was emblematic of our time in LA. We didn't live in LA for too long. We lived there like a year and a half, got it in LA. And I think to them it was a little bit like, well, we moved out of LA and now we're selling this car, which I think they really associated with the time. So, yeah, I can't love you back, but there are definitely experiences that you hold on to and memories that you hold on to. And I think it's tough because, yeah, I mean, like, you know, some things you have to let go of at some point. And I mean, I do truly hope that this car I have for a very, very long time, you know, even if it becomes not front and center, but then again, I mean, probably most likely if and when I do get rid of it, it would probably be to get into another car. But like, right. So, you know, with the kids, my son like watches that Wind Dance. Have you seen the Wind Dance film?
Mm-hmm.
So there's like an 8-minute thing. You can look it up. It documents like the Pikes Peak hill climb in 1988 or 1989. And this is Climb Dance, excuse me.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is like truly amazing. And my son just watches this all the time, thinks it's the coolest thing in the world. And
it's a Peugeot, right?
It's the turbo version of my car.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it's in fact, when you pop the hood of my car, you could just see where they would just bolt the turbo on and then call it the T16 instead of the Mi16. But so you see the stripes, your Talbot stripes there, right?
Yeah.
And JD was just like, you know, he would just be like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if you like went around town and you told people it's the same car? And I was like, yeah, it'd be cool. But then you could tell he was like, his wheels were turning and he was like, wouldn't it be cool if you had those stripes? And I was like, dude, I would get those stripes in my car. Should I get those stripes? And he was like, oh my God. So I ordered them. I haven't gotten them yet. And we're like going to put the stripes on together, you know? And he's just like, every day he comes home from school, he's like, did the stripes come?
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, you know, and his bedroom like looks right out onto the car. I've got my carport and his bedroom window is like Peugeot nose right to his window kind of thing. So he's like, oh, I can't wait to see that.
That's freaking adorable, man.
It is. It's a nice bonding thing, you know?
It is. Yeah. And also I think like that kind of like that mentality, like, because I think a lot of times like something as large scale as a vehicle is seen kind of something as like somewhat impenetrable, right? Where like you just say like, yeah, we can order these stickers, like we can change this, we can do that, like
right,
like we can repair a dryer, like a big, like just because something is big doesn't mean like you just throw it away and get another one, or like that you can't change it. Like you're empowering like decision making and kind of like customization, and like the whole thing that we're about is looking at your car as more than an appliance, right?
Exactly.
Like you're imparting that kind of spirit, like you can make it you, right?
Right.
And then they can learn all about how it's okay to swear at the thing that you're attempting to fix.
Oh yeah, no, they've seen that.
And then they learn how to save ebay.co.uk searches for parts.
Yeah. Well, and I this is a good time for me to give credit where credit's due. Dave, you helped me out a lot on one of my repairs here. And, you know, I mean, I do think another thing to learn on things is not only having the courage to try things and kind of step out of the comfort zone and say like, I'm going to go for it. I want to like try to do this thing. And you know what, like who says I can't fix this or whatever, but also then knowing when to like ask for help.
Sure.
And I mean, when it comes to cars, like the car community is amazing.
Right.
And the car community is amazing in that like, they want to help you out.
Yeah.
You know, everyone wants to help each other out. The car community is also like so amazingly enabling, and it is incredible. It's like we find the weirdest fucking cars on Craigslist, and our reaction is like, I want my friend to buy this.
Yeah.
Like,
who can we talk into this bad decision? Yeah.
I'm not going to buy this.
Right.
But I really want to know someone who's going to buy this thing.
Talk about your donation idea.
Oh yeah, what was that I had?
Yeah, it was a string of tweets you had where you were talking about how like instead of like where you could donate your car to like NPR.
Yeah, right. So I was right because that really did come from because the NPR, they were the CPR, our NPR carrier, Colorado Public Radio, was like, "Oh, are you sick of repairing that old car that just doesn't, or are you just ready for a new one? Well, you can donate it to Colorado Public Radio," which, okay, great. And I was thinking to myself, like, I mean, come on. Like all of us weird car Twitter people, we're not making profit, so we could set up as a nonprofit, right? So we got that part covered. We're making profit. And then if we did that, then we could just be like, do you have this old car that you just don't know what to do with? Like, just give it to us. It's really a great solution. Yeah,
we'll strip it for parts.
Yeah, you get a tax credit.
Right.
You'll take your you could just picture David Tracy's yard, when the authorities came in and were like, dude, too many cars. But everyone in Weird Car Twitter just like, oh, another car. Yeah.
I know somebody that donated an Acura Integra. Like I think our friend Mark donated his GSR, right? So like 1990, what was that? Wow. 2, right? Something like that. 91, 92. And then I had a friend of mine way back in the day. He donated his 1981 Volkswagen Rabbit.
Wow, really?
I donated my I donated my Subaru when I was in Oklahoma when I got my Volkswagen.
So did you get to determine the value on that, or did they tell you?
They told me. They emailed me a receipt
and demanded an apology for all of the unspeakable things you did to that Subaru, Ian.
Oh man.
I want to know. I do wonder. I'm like, because part of the thing is, I'm like, what are they doing with the cars? Like, okay, someone donate an 81 Volkswagen Rabbit. Are they really refurbishing that and are selling it, or is it just being sold for scrap?
Yeah, I think sometimes I think they often just sell it at auction.
Yeah.
Or it goes to scrap. I'm sure the Subaru ended up in a scrapyard.
Yeah, salvage auction, scrap. Yeah, that kind of like that chain. I think my Infiniti M45 went into that chain.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyways, I think that we could take a bite out of their car haul. Yeah, I love Colorado Public Radio. Don't get me wrong, but they better watch their backs.
We're coming for you, motherfuckers.
Yes, exactly.
We got Steve Albini on blast, and we're coming for you. If our cars can make it to your house to get the other car.
Yeah, exactly right. Gonna hop in my Renault. And oh shit! Sorry,
I'm just two-fisting a Barth Pistons. Like, come on!
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, Dave, you helped out a lot, and I mean, I did reach out to the car community and was like, "Hey, I can find these parts, but I mean, the Peugeot is so different than the Alpha. Mm-hmm. It is still workable. Like, it's not this like extreme. It's a 1989 car, so it's not this." Extremely modern thing where it's just like big ECU and all that stuff. Right. It's still like pretty much logically works together.
Great era to work on, right?
But it's a whole different layout, and it all works differently. So you helped me out big time, and I mean, when it comes down to it, when you get under the car or whatever, or you're reaching into the car and you start taking things apart. You're like, that's right. Like these are bolts and hoses, and this fits into here. And so we were in a situation at Dave's house, and we were redoing a CV boot on one of my axles, and it was one of those things where it was like, okay, like the axle's out of the car. Mm-hmm. This car has 3 wheels right now, and it's getting late, but you're like, this car's not going anywhere, and I'm not getting home until this is put back together. Right. So it was one of those things where it was like, I got home at 3:00 in the morning. It was it was amazing, the work that we did. And really Dave did.
Well,
And,
because most of this is like talking it through, right? Like that dialogue is and kind of collaborative, like vision around that kind of stuff is something that I think is really important to like working on cars with friends, right?
Yeah, no, thank you. But I mean, I do agree with that. Yeah.
And I think I'm probably at a similar mechanical level to you. And I think one of my big problems is like, I haven't done it a ton, so I lack confidence in it. But I feel like when I'm with someone like Dave, who is a competent mechanic, I then become a semi-competent mechanic, because it's like, you have to talk through it. And if I am talking through it in my head, I'm going to say, "No, you're a fucking idiot."
Right. No, exactly. But like, if you're not talking through and you've never done it before, you're like, it seems like I should be able to take that off. But this is another part of you that's like, are you fucking crazy? You're going to take that off?
Yeah.
Right.
But then, you're working with someone and Dave was like, whoop, so I'll take that off. And you're like, yeah, that's what I was thinking. You take that off, right?
But remember, there were things I was like, we're not taking that off tonight, David.
I did come with parts that we didn't quite get to, which thank God, because we would have been there a few more hours at least.
Yeah.
But the funny PS to this whole thing is that we worked all night. We got this thing. We got the CV boot on, drove it home. It's like gliding on silk. It was so beautifully smooth. It was like, I was so exhausted, and yet it was the perfect drive. It was 3:00 in the morning. I got on 25 for a little bit. There was no traffic, and I was just in my French car at night, blasting New Order, and just like, this is great. Yes. I mean, I got home so quickly, and it was just, the car was, beautiful. So, driving around for a couple days at most, and then I don't even know what made me do this, but I was like, I'm going to look under the car.
I told you to look under the car. Oh,
maybe that's what it was.
Yeah.
Anyways, I look under the car. CV boot has entirely slipped off where it should be. There's grease everywhere, like all over the car. And I was like, and I called him, and I was, to your point about confidence, I was like, all right, I think I could probably do this. Mm-hmm. And I think Dave was not only wanting to help, but was also like, wait a minute, I'm kind of curious about this too. So he was like, I'm coming over.
Yeah, so I was putting tools in my car as I'm talking David through him being able to do it. Yeah.
So we spent another couple hours under the car, and we kind of did our own solution, and it's been perfect. So
good.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of like some of these CV clamps. I have since we've worked on this twice, the same boot, I have since bought CV clamps and 2 different kinds of pliers, actually 3, and like one installation tool to like always do it right the next time, right?
The CV clamp thing is so weird. It is definitely one of those things now, because I didn't do CV work on the Alpha, but I was having to mess with a lot of different clamps. But the CV thing with the Peugeot, I'm like, wow, these clamps fucking suck. Like, yeah, it's almost like this seems like such a basic thing, and yet they were such a challenge.
It's so easy to do it when it's out of the car. But when you need to do the ones while the axle is installed in the car, it's a nightmare.
Those boot kits suck, and they have forever. Like they've always been bad. That's why I stopped doing them on my cars, and I just I ship the axles to get rebuilt. Like I'm not even gonna mess with it.
Well, okay. So when I bought the car, it was disclosed to me that it needed the axles redone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Steve looks at it and he's like, they do need that. However, he's like, they're not nearly as bad as this guy's making it out to. They're not clunking. They're not making a bunch of noise. The boots are torn, but I'm not. He's like, honestly, like not a problem at all. I'm thinking like new tires. This thing is ready to go. And indeed, we drove it 1,000 miles or whatever to Denver. No problem. However, he was like, and he's an apprentice, as he explained to you, he's an apprentice mechanic at like a Land Rover and a Porsche place. So he like works on cars, and he took it to his boss who used to work on Peugeots. And so he was familiar with it. and Steve was like, we should just get one of those universal CV kits. And it's really just like a boot that goes over the boot and pack it with grease. No problem. Well, the Peugeot's axles are really, really narrow. Mm-hmm. And so he calls me up like the day before I'm about to fly to Montana. He's like, yeah, that boot's not staying on there, man. He's like, last thing is like, I'm going to try to get the boot on there with silicone tape and just to try to hold it on there. And he's like, he did that. He packed it with grease. He used silicone tape and then drove it for like a half a mile. And he was like, yeah, no, that didn't work. So he was like, there's nothing to do here. It's like, you can't even put grease in it because it's torn all the way around. Oh. And, but we did it. We drove the whole way. And then I got a new axle from Germany, SKF aftermarket, fit right in. And I had a place put it in for me, a place that I'm friendly with, because they were just wanted to see the car. So they're like, bring it by, we'll do it for free. And then I didn't realize the other one needed to be reworked too, and was like talking to a Peugeot guy with parts, and he was like, you could just try doing like a new boot. And that's when I contacted Dave, and we were like, let's do it. So this is like an actual French boot that fits.
Oh, okay. It's not, so it wasn't like a universal one.
This is not
it's a proper, the proper one. Yeah.
No, it's like PSA, kind of a thing.
Oh, okay. I was picturing the universal thing that like splits and clamp it.
Oh, yeah.
Those things are garbage.
Yeah. No. So smash cut to David and Dave in the garage. One of us in a onesie. Throwing it on,
Yeah, exactly. So we did that. So we did the boot, and we also did the control arm.
Yes.
We redid like the mount on the control arm, which was loose, and that was really causing a pronounced problem because you could really feel like the side kind of, especially at low speeds. And and then I had brought a motor mount because my lower motor mount is worn, and Dave very wisely was like, it was probably 1 o'clock in the morning, and he was like, I don't think we should do it. And I was like, really? Are you sure? Because we got a lot of shit off the car already. And he was like trying to stay positive. I think he was trying not to freak me out. And he was like, no, I just think we should save it. And then at 3 o'clock in the morning, I was like, oh, thank God we didn't get the fucking more shit out. God knows what would have happened.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of you. I'm very proud of you, Dave, both for helping our friend and also just for staying awake that long, because normally your bedtime is like 9:30 p.m.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I will say, he was wonderfully helpful, but he was bitching about how tired he was. Starting at like 9:30, he was like, "Oh, it's past my bedtime." Like when you have guests over and they're trying to leave,
and you're like, "Ah!"
Exactly. Yeah. That was Dave. I came over, we talked a little bit about the Peugeot, got the tire off, and he was like, gotta be up in the morning.
Well, that's what you need to know. In about 6 minutes, we'll see a character I like to call the Crypt Keeper. Mm-hmm. And it's when there's just a thing comes over Dave's face, and you could just see like it's like a binary state of tired, not tired.
Yeah,
with Dave. Yeah.
Well, I exhaust him, I think.
No. When David came over, I kicked into that IT mode that we have to enter every now and then, Ian, right? Yeah. Like we have this special reserve, like that you have to stay up all night for something, right? Like your kid's got to go to the hospital. You've got an outage at work, something bad is happening, right? Like, so you just tap in and you get it done, right? And like having somebody like David, like laying on the floor with you that is so easy to talk to and tells me stories about some of my favorite bands in the entire universe, right? Like, yeah, like it's fantastic. So there's way worse ways to spend time.
He was wearing a Quicksand shirt, so that was easy. But the other thing about that night that was special, and that actually I did want to say that's interesting about the car stuff, which is that I have Crohn's disease, and I've had it since, well, I was diagnosed when I was like 14, and I'm 42. So I've had it for a long time. Have never been in remission. The last, I would say, 6 months have been really, my health has really backslid. However, in the last few weeks, I've gotten on a new medication, and I think things are on the upswing now.
Oh, good, good.
This was interesting because sometimes you can kind of feel when the flare-ups are coming, what I call Crohn's attacks, and other times they kind of blindside you a little bit. But I think that's part of living with the disease, and I'm sure it's no different than other conditions. And that night, I was on the way to Dave's house, and I was like, man, I'm not feeling great. And if I was at home and I wasn't doing this, I would probably know a couple things that I could do to try to mitigate things. But also I was like, shit, I know I need to take care of this with my car. And hopefully this isn't as bad as it seems. And we were hanging out, trying to fix the car. And I was excited to finally meet Dave in person and hang out with him.
Likewise.
And my stomach, I was in fucking agony. I mean, and I was trying to hide it, and it was.
I never would have known if you hadn't told me.
Well, no, that's interesting because I thought felt like it was kind of obvious. But the ironic thing is that we spent so much time laying down on the floor, so we could reach up, that I was like, literally, that's all I wanted to do was just lay down because I was in so much pain, and that's what we did. We were like laying down the whole time, so that was nice, But the reason why I bring that up is not just because that was sort of an interesting night for a lot of different reasons, but I was thinking about it and I was like, having these cars, and you guys know better than I do because I had the Alpha, now I have the Peugeot, but it's sort of a parallel thing where you start getting a sense of like I'm an imperfect, I'm not just aesthetically, I'm an imperfect person, like physically. I have Crohn's disease, right? Like I have these, I'm not like right out of the factory, brand spanking new.
Well, there's something to manage.
Yes.
Right? Yes.
And, I'm, older, and then I have these other conditions, but then you sort of balance that by sort of being like, I know what to look for in myself. So I'm starting to, a Crohn's attack or flare up doesn't necessarily start with like pain. It starts with this very subtle feeling. And if you catch it and you learn to recognize that, and you get past the denial when you're in your teens and 20s, when you just want to live your life and put your head in the sand and say, no, like I'm going to be like everybody else. And when you sort of start picking up the subtleties, you can, like I said, you can do something. And for me, with Crohn's, it's like I can get miso soup or I can get salmon sushi and or not have anything and take a heat pad, maybe take this pill. With cars, it's sort of something similar where you start being like, okay, I have a car that's 42 years old or 32 years old.
I know
exactly.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Right.
This fluid, and you start trying to get a sense of being like, that's okay, that's normal. It's an old car. It's going to do this. And that's not okay. That's a sign. And I need to sort of address that sooner than later. And I don't know all that with the Peugeot yet. I'm still, just yesterday, I think I posted a long thread about like every leak that I had located. But I was like, I'm going to do this meticulously. And it's definitely like some stuff is more pressing than others. But, with like the CV thing, with the axle thing, I was like, this is the Crohn's attack. Like, this shit needs to be dealt with.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that like owning a car is a little bit like an older car. You sort of have to look for that thing.
Yeah.
Like, what's the sign?
Well, and David had brought it up too about managing things. And there was something that my friend Matt told me a long time ago. The first time I drove a race car, I was really freaked out by it, and I was having a really hard time getting comfortable, and couldn't find a way into it. Like where something just feels overwhelming, and you gotta like find a toehold and get into it. And so I called him, and he said, there's always going to be something to manage with every race car. Like you have to figure out what the thing to manage is, and then like put that over there in your like management place, and then you can concentrate on other things, you know, to do that. And like, there's all these great analogies with cars that you can kind of map to your life. And like, I think about that. There's always something to manage thing with people, like at work or whatever, all the time. Like I
seriously think about Matt's thing like all the time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. There's always something to manage.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And and I think it's just like you said, like you got to get comfortable with that idea that like, oh, there are going to be issues. You just have to like, you know, figure out a strategy and figure out how to deal with them, whether it's like internally in your own dumb brain or with your dumb car.
Right. And that's the thing, right? Because you're like, this car, I want it to be perfect, right? I want to just be like, oh yeah, the car's 100%. Like, it's not 100%.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably never going to be 100%. And that's all right, because the car is from 1989 and it's old and it's okay. And in some ways it's better to be like, if the car is perfect, then I'm not thinking about what's wrong with it.
Right. No, like there's beauty in some flaws, right?
And totally. And I think it forces you to sort of be more aware of things.
Right.
And, you know, like even with the Prius, I'm sort of starting the Prius 2009, you know, it's an older car. It's got more miles than the Peugeot does. And I'm like, this car is, you know, I'm trying to keep my finger on the pulse a little bit more. When I first had it, it was like, oh yeah, this car is just like this indestructible thing. It just goes, you know, and that's it. And now I'm like, no, the Prius is just, it's seen a lot of hours. And so.
But like the thing is, once you own one of these kind of more unreliable cars, you will forever be the person who will be in a random like rental car or somebody or
a Lyft.
One thing that's happened to me in the passenger seat of a coworker's car, and I'll turn down the volume of the radio and just be like, "Did you hear that?
Yeah,
did you hear that? You need to take that. You need to get that taken care of."
Right.
I did that exact thing. We were in a Lyft in LA, and I heard something. I was like, "Whew, I don't like the sound of that coming from like. It sounds like some bad bearings in the back." And I was like, "Do you hear that's like a clunking, kind of a squeaking sound from the back?" And he was like, "Yeah, this is something rubbing against." I was like, "Yeah, I don't think so." You know?
Yeah.
Yep.
You need to check that out.
I think that like one thing that I've seen develop is like, as you kind of like, you have these cars in your life, right? You kind of develop these nerve endings for them, right? And so like your Prius nerve endings have developed, David, right? Like, and your nerve endings are going to develop with the Peugeot, right?
Yeah.
Like there's that and to kind of like show like what an extreme example of it looks like there, I have two things. I've told this story on the podcast before, but like when I had my first Saab 900 turbo, I had done the head gasket on it. I had been in it, you know, like I'd done a bunch of work. I was driving to work one morning and I hear like a tiny little right. And so like, you know, your head starts going and I rev the engine. It doesn't change with the rev. So I'm like, oh God, what is it? Like something's going on. Like, is it the AC compressor? Blah, blah, blah. Right. And then it turned out my coffee cup that I had, like the lid was shut and it was just adjusting to the pressure. Like I popped it and the squeak stopped. Right.
Oh,
so like my hearing was just like on high alert. Right.
Yeah.
And then like the other kind of like side of that is it like, where is Ian, and he hates it when I talk about him. He hates it when I talk about how good of a driver he is. But like at the kart track, Ian and I love going go-karting, okay? So we'll get in karts and Ian instantly, because his nerve endings are just wired different, there's lightning shooting through him, he picks up like the karts are completely different all the time. Like one understeers, one oversteers, blah, 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 right? He gets the kart during the first lap. It takes me 3 or 4, right? And so like you're gonna get there with the Peugeot and like you're building up this kind of like pathway and like this, what's the term, neuroplasticity?
Yeah,
right, to like build these connections with your car and like know like, okay, that squeak is normal, or oh, all of a sudden this one's new, oh, it's an idler pulley,
Yeah,
like getting that stuff.
It's funny because like the Alpha had a bad transaxle mount, and in the beginning it was like quite literally like you couldn't imagine a more alarming sound and sensation when you would shift and you would feel something like thump from underneath the car, and you'd be like, "What the hell?" Like, all right, the car is dead. Send it to NPR.
Call those weird dudes from Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. And instead it was like, okay, you research it. You're like, all right, now it's a mount. There's 2 other mounts in place, and it needs to be addressed. And I went to Centerline, and they were like, oh, we have every mount except that one. And then you're like, okay, so it can wait a little bit, and there's these workarounds, and it's almost like started thinking of it like it was like walking with a limp. Like the car is just like, it's not gonna just fall over and die, but it's like it's just gonna be like walking with a limp for a little bit until it can get to, it can get that new transaxle mount, and then it'll be all right again. It can walk okay, but it's the difference between like when you're not used to that and you haven't sort of developed that sense yet, being like quite literally like the car is dead. Like it's
right.
Right. I'm assuming it will never move again because now this, transaxle mount sounds bad, and like, but then when you start learning about it, you're like, oh, it's okay. Like it's a thing. I shouldn't like be cavalier about it, but it's all right. Like it'll still drive. I need to be a little easier on the clutch. Like I can work with this in the meantime.
Well, that's the other thing too, is that, when you get into that mode of like, oh, there's a thing I have to manage, you've also graduated from another thing, which is that, I think a lot of people who treat their cars as appliances, car working and car not working, those are binary conditions, right? Whereas
totally,
there's a whole
experience
of ownership that happens in between those two.
Right. Well, did you guys see this sort of, I don't know, viral in the car world, I think, but the tweets about the guy who was like, I bought a BMW for $17,000.
Yes.
And then,
I did.
Needed $15,000 of work.
Yeah.
And I had mixed. Well, I'm curious about what you guys thought about it, because I was like, I felt like this was going to come up, so I missed that. Bring me up to speed.
So a gentleman posted online he had purchased a used late 2000s BMW 5 Series for
correction.
Okay.
This was covered in news in an article, so maybe he posted online, but it was this was actually written about in like a newspaper, like their website. So it was covered as like news. Man does that. But anyway,
right.
So go
right.
on. Okay.
Yes. And so he bought it for like 16 grand. It ended up needing like 17 grand in work. And so he was getting scammed, right? Like, local man scammed, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
By the fucking BMW, right? That you shouldn't,
should have known better. Yes.
Well, there is should have known better, but then there's people that like view cars as appliances, right? So they see a $16,000 appliance and they're like, I have $16,000. I can either get a Nissan Versa, right? Which is a literal toaster on wheels, or I can get a used BMW, right?
Right.
Like,
and if you're not a car nerd, BMW is like, that's a good car.
That's a status symbol.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I had a coworker who bought a Range Rover.
Yeah.
This was only a few years ago. This is probably 6 or 7 years ago. Bought a Range Rover for like $7,000, and it was like a new Range Rover.
No, that seems like a red flag.
Yeah.
And he came into work. I mean, just so psyched at the crazy deal that he got.
Oh yeah.
It lasted maybe 2 weeks, and it needed a $19,000 transmission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he drove it in limp mode at like 15 miles an hour to and from work for months before he finally got rid of it.
Good for him.
It just was the most miserable. He aged like 40 years in those couple of months. It was unbelievable.
Reading that whole thing about the guy with the BMW, I was like, and everyone was sort of dunking on him, like, well, you don't even get a pre-inspection,
Right.
and this is what you get. And I was like, I get it, but I also am not about to I don't want to go too hard on the guy.
Right. I feel bad for him, for sure.
I do feel bad for him. And it's like, also, there's another element here, which is that when you have no interest, you don't have it's not even about the skills. You have zero interest to even fix your own car. You don't care to. It doesn't mean you ever want to do. You don't have the time to do it. You don't give a shit. Is that like, you read the stuff that was like $17,000 of repair, and you're reading this stuff and you're like, why? That is not $17,000 of repair. One of them was a torn CV boot. Now it's just like, who was like, the missing part of the story is like, who's fucking charging this guy?
Right.
Dealership.
Yeah. Crazy dealer estimate. Right.
Yeah. So you're like, this is not the only part of it is like, oh, he should have done it. You're just like, this whole thing is, he is getting like, maybe he should have done his due diligence more, but also maybe he got scammed on the repairs too. Like,
for sure.
It's a CV boot.
The other thing too is like, I don't know if you guys have found this too, but like when I've told non-car friends to get a pre-purchase inspection, it feels like I've told them some crazy life hack that they had no idea existed. Like a lot of people don't know that that's an option.
And that some dealers will do it for free. Like when I bought my M45, I didn't buy it at an Infiniti dealer. I bought it at like an AutoNation Ford place, right? But I took it down the street to Infiniti and they did a free pre-sale inspection for it.
Yeah, those, and also, I mean, just look it up, like Google it. I mean, I told you guys
blah, 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 common problems, enter.
Yeah, I think I told you guys about the Ford Freestyle last time. And I foolishly got into a Ford Freestyle trying to save money. We did the lease experiment for a while. Great, we're driving a brand new car, Subaru, and then we're looking at our budget. Oh man, like we're spending a lot of money. We don't have a lot to show for it. You know what? We need to just like buy a car. So we buy a used, and I'm looking for a used car. Oh, it's Ford Freestyle. Never really even heard of that car. Right. But it's a wagon. It's got a lot of space. It's all-wheel drive. It's all that stuff. It's built on a Volvo platform. Price is right. I look it up, and I'm like, man, this thing has got one problem that everyone freaks out about, and that's the CVT. And it's just like, and when that thing goes, it totals the car. There's no easy fix for it. There's no cheap fix for it. And I was just like, we decided to do it anyway. Yeah, 3 months into the ownership, you start getting a warning on the transmission and the car starts. I mean, it was almost like I knew that was going to happen. And I ended up getting out of it okay on that one, and that led to the Prius. But it was just like, I mean, at least I'd looked it up. And I was like, yep, I'm not surprised. That's the CVT. Stupid Ford Freestyle CVT.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, did you want to ask anything specifically?
Not really.
Well, I think the plan, like, how you see it fitting into your life, like on a day-to-day basis,
Well, I don't commute, so I don't have the kids' school is extremely close. It's like 2 miles.
Okay.
And we have another car, and so I don't have like a job that I'm commuting to every day. I believe very much in the drive your car, thing where it's kind of like you've got this amazing car, you just drive it, enjoy it, So I plan on driving it all the time. It's a little stressful. In fact, this picture is good. I just took this picture the other day, and if you look in front of that tire, you could see some fluid.
Yeah.
And that was just water. So I mean, but that's the experience of this car. And I think probably most old cars is like, the constant, quote unquote temperature checks, literally, because I think it's running hot, but also just like you get out of the car and you're looking down and you're like, shit, was that there before? Was that because I drove through a puddle? Like, why is there wetness under my car? And, that's the sort of adventure. And again, it goes back to this thing of like getting your nerves a little bit more in tune with this versus the alpha, and kind of getting to know the car. And so, like, hey, I got a doctor's appointment. That's where I was going for this. Like, I'm going to drive my car over there. I got to go to the grocery store. I mean, I love driving. And if I'm sitting in traffic, I hate it. Like, that's not a unique thing. But, hey, I have the kind of job where I can go grocery shopping in the middle of the day on a weekday when not many people are there. Cool. Like, I'm going to take my car and cruise out there, and it's fun. And when I have the opportunity to go, like, to drive up to, visit my in-laws who live up in Boulder County, I get to take it on the highway and everything and take the family with me and kind of let it stretch its legs a little bit. Took my son to see a Super Bee. He loves Super Bees.
That's awesome.
Turns out that my father-in-law knows somebody who has one. And by the way, can I just tell you a funny story about that? So,
yeah.
Super Bee. The guy was a very nice guy. He took my son out in the car. He has got an amazing car collection. Very much an American car guy.
I was wondering what he thought of this picture.
So I was like, okay, obviously I'm going to drive my Peugeot up there. Thinking this guy, because this guy's like a big time car guy. He ran for a very long time an excellent auto repair shop. And I'm not going to name specifics, but he had excellent reputation, excellent mechanic, fantastic mechanic. And so I was like, he'll appreciate the fact that there's like a Peugeot on his property, right? So I pull up, zero recognition that like I've pulled up in, I might as well be pulled up in a Kia.
Right.
Just like, like, okay, like hop out of the car, and he's immediately like, boom, all right, here's the Super Bee, here's this old Mercury, here's this. And so all day, just long time looking at these old ass cars, American cars. And finally I was like, hey, do you mind if I park my Peugeot next to your Super Bee? I want to get a picture of them together. And he was like, no, yeah, go ahead. Like, again, no recognition. So I pulled next to it, and I was like, they're kind of siblings because Stellantis. And he was like, yeah. And he just said it, and I was like, I'm not sure if he knows like the reference. So I was like, because, FCA and PSA, so Dodge, Chrysler, Peugeot.
Right. And just a super whirlwind of unreliability. Yeah.
And he just was like, dead eye stared at me, and he goes, yeah, that's why I won't ever buy another Chrysler product again. And that's like, and he didn't say it as a smart ass remark. He was just literally like, this, like, I won't ever buy another Chrysler product again because they're associated with Fiat and, and Peugeot and all that. And I was just like, okay, like, come on.
Yeah.
We're like, all right, buddy.
Yeah, because you got your stink on it.
I mean, he's like, I've owned like 8 Jeeps or whatever. And I'm like, right. Because let me tell you something. Peugeot is building your Jeep now.
Right.
They're just like building your Jeep and putting French shit all in it.
Right.
They're just getting all you Jeep owners.
Yeah.
Come on.
Right.
Anyway, I was just like, I love that Super Bee. And he's a great guy. I mean, he's a very nice guy for doing that. But I was also just like, I hate this double standard of your American classic car guy who's just like rolls up like, this is a 68 Camaro. You're like, dude, it's cool. Come on.
Right.
There's like, I've only seen 8 other of those today. You're allowed to appreciate other people's cars.
Well, I think that's one of the great things about, our current age, of, being a car person who's exposed to the internet, and even like when we were growing up, like getting a little bit more like kind of esoteric car mags and stuff like that. Of like, I think most people our age and younger who are into cars are into everything. Like you can appreciate everything, Whereas I think when you were older, you just weren't exposed to anything. And so you ended up in these silos that were more rigid than they are now.
Well, I mean, I've heard other interpretations that go a step further that I tend to subscribe to, which is that the weird car subculture is a reaction to your sort of conservative white male thing where it's this club, and it's like these are the cars that we like.
Right.
We've pumped up the prices. You can't just like go buy a fucking 66 Corvette or whatever. And it's like, well, so then, okay, people like cars. Like that's just a thing. Like it cuts across every group. People love cars. They love cars. So you want to get into cars, and that group is excluding you. And it's like, I can buy this car for $2,000. Well, what's cool about this car? And then a community kind of forms around this. Well, you can afford these cars. And you know what? Like this car is just as fast as a fucking 57 Fairlane or whatever. Like, so it's, what is it about speed? Like what really makes this car cool? That thing is like a giant, huge limousine with like, and yet it has 2 doors. And like this thing, it takes 5 minutes to go like, me, isn't that sweet? You hit this button and then it goes like that. You're like, that okay, that is kind of cool. But like, that's not the only thing that's cool. Here's a car from Japan from like 1984. Like, and
with active rear steering, right?
Yeah, like exactly. Like, and it's just like, they're cars. And so that's what I like about like weird car Twitter is like, what it really is just it's more inclusive in that like, hey, you know what? You just have to like cars. Like, and we're not going to be like, oh yeah, I'm not buying any Jeeps anymore because the Frenchies got their hands on them. You're just like, cool, good attitude. That's what we need. We need, you know what? The world, we were all getting along a little too well. Thankfully, we found something we can finally disagree on. Stellantis. Like, come on.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Anyway,
I love the fact that like before that interaction, because that interaction was a boundary set, right? Like that was like he had finally had enough of like, you saying like, park my Peugeot, right? Yeah. And like he's like, let it go, Bert, let it go, right? Like he sees you pull up and he's like, oh god damn it, right? Yeah. And so like all of this, and then you just being wonderful car person David Obuchowski, right, says something that's funny about these two that are complete opposite cars, that they're kind of siblings, and he's like, that's it, fuck this guy. Right, this totally. A line has been crossed.
Yeah, no, and that's the funny thing too, is you're like, if you're that insecure that you think that my like 1.9 liter 4-cylinder is like just like your Super B. The guy's like, oh, that just cuts a little too close to home.
He's in the shower scrubbing. It's not like the Super B. It's not like the Super B.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, how big's that engine? You can't remember what but he's like, it's like a 5-liter or whatever it is. I'm just like, Jesus Christ.
Right.
It's like, JD, this car's engine is like 4 times bigger than Daddy's.
Yep. And here's the thing, Daddy doesn't have issues with that.
Right, exactly. Yeah. That's just cool, and I'm fine with it.
You're right. He's the one that has to pay for $9 a gallon gas,
Also, somehow my car probably goes faster than it. I'm not really sure how, but what did I just read? I don't know if it was true, but someone was like, oh yeah, like a 3-cylinder Ford engine right now is like faster than the 1970 V8 Ford engine. And I was just like, wow, that's crazy. That's like,
right? Yeah,
we're beyond the cubic inches.
Yeah.
So that was a 7-liter in the Super B.
Jesus Christ.
7-liter, right? Yeah, I knew it. I was like, yeah, this is. crazy. A 3.5 size, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, 425 horsepower.
Curb weight.
Curb weight.
7 billion pounds.
Yeah, right. A black hole.
Curb weight. 4,100 pounds.
Jesus Christ. Yeah. All right. And probably drum brakes all around, so it takes them, 3 miles to stop. But that's fine. Yeah. It's a cool car. It is a cool car. Like, I like old muscle cars. I love your car. I don't like dicks that they're like, don't get your stink on my car.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
We're not the same. Well, see, that's the thing, because you're not taking away anything from him, right?
Yeah.
But that is viewed as something that takes away from what he has as the ideal of his car, right?
Right.
Your presence. And I think that weird car Twitter is kind of based on that fundamental that we all understand that we're this car exists over here and it doesn't take away anything from this car over here, right? These cars exist and that's okay, right?
There's a short story by Will Self, the British writer, called The Quantity Theory of Insanity. And it is the premise is that there's only a set amount of sanity to go around in the world, and because there's been so much population, that's why you have insanity, is because there's not enough of it. And I do feel like some of these people are like the quantity theory of coolness. If there's only so much coolness going on, and if all of a sudden a 1989 Peugeot is considered cool, then you're stealing. That's going to really endanger the coolness of my car. And it's like, dude, it's fine. Cars are just cool. There's not a finite amount of coolness in the world. Your car's allowed to be cool forever.
Right.
It's forever cool.
The only thing that's not making it cool is your attitude, mister.
Right. Like the Civic over here that also was guess what? I recognize that Civic, every single person in high school drove it, and it was the most unremarkable piece of shit in the world. I recognize that, but now I also recognize that actually I wasn't really appreciating it, and it is cool, and people like it, and that's fine. You can just be cool with that, And
I think the other thing that we talk about this a lot too. I had a whole thing for a while about people thinking about things in zero-sum terms, and we were talking about it with politics, but it applies here too, and it's exactly what you're talking about there's a finite amount of something, but it also leads people to make these weird things where if your Peugeot being cool really had nothing to do with this other guy, but by using this sort of thinking of there's a finite amount of car cool that exists, he's making it about him.
Oh yeah.
And my analogy that I have for it is if you were at Starbucks and every time they call out someone else's name, you just shout, "That's not my coffee." That's also not my coffee.
Right.
Right. That's basically what you're telling people.
Yeah. Thank you. Right. Thank you, sir.
Right.
Yeah, totally. That's a good way to put it.
I think about that often because I have a neighbor that, is very much that, that's not my order guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
How does your Peugeot affect me?
Right.
This is going to blow your mind, but it doesn't.
In fact, if you give it a chance, it could make your life better.
Yeah.
Right? Because you could be part of this, right?
Yeah. Or even better, I've taken one off the market that you're not tempted to buy.
It can't hurt you anymore. It's
late at night, you wake up at 3:00 in the morning and you go, I want a Peugeot.
Oh, there's none for sale.
Oh, thank God.
I mean,
that was close.
In that case, there are a finite number. Right? There are a finite number of Peugeot 405s that are available for
that browser tab just gets shame closed.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yep.
All right.
David, well, real quick, I want to touch on David's tradition. Right.
Okay,
David's, because this will be coming out around the holidays, maybe, we don't know. But so when you had your Alpha, David, you started a tradition?
Yes.
Right? Let's hear it.
Well, so I feel this fun European cars, it has this sort of alpine feel to it. And again, I come from the school of use your car. And I felt like, well, it's time to get a Christmas tree. I could put it on the Prius, or I could put it on and also, what are you going to worry about scratching the paint on the Alfa Romeo? The fucking thing is, it's just an overspray job. And no, I can't say the same thing for the Peugeot, which is why I put a moving blanket between the tree and the car. But yeah, I definitely was like, this is a fun tradition. I mean, go get the tree in like your fun car. And that's what it's all about. I mean, the holidays, to me, it's all about like, you have a tradition, you watch Christmas Vacation every year. Is it totally corny? Yes. We read A Christmas Carol, Dickens' A Christmas Carol to the kids every year. We read it aloud. But we do all this stuff. It's tradition. It's kind of corny. It's fun. And it kind of lets you know, like, it's the holidays. And as far as I'm concerned, like, taking your weird car and driving. And by the way, like, both times I'm so excited about this because these are not cars that, like, every time you stop at a red light, people are like, cool car, man.
Right.
Most of the time with the Alpha, people were just like, this fucking piece of shit. Did you drive faster? And which you're like, I can't, and also has a bad transaxle mount. And they're like, fix your BMW. And I'm like, it's not a BMW. And then this, most people are like, oh no, we're like, oh, that's a white Toyota or whatever. And you're like, it's not. But then you do see people who get it, and they're just like, oh my God, their mind's blown. So I went to the Home Depot at this Christmas tree lot here at the Home Depot. I didn't exactly go up to the mountains for this one. But the lady came out who I bought it from, and she was like, just like, oh my God, look at this thing. She had no idea what kind of car it was. She just goes, is this a Back to the Future car? Which is the second time I've gotten that in like a month.
Really?
All people can get is that, like, there is something kind of 80s about it.
Oh.
And maybe aerodynamic, and their like brain is just like, DeLorean, I guess. Which I'm like, you know what? Awesome. That's fine. But yeah, so the lady at the Home Depot came out and was like, whoa, what is that thing? And she thought it was so cool. And when I had the Alpha and I put the tree on there, the guy at the Christmas tree farm in like Gun Barrel or whatever was like, his totally boring day of like strapping Christmas trees to the tops of Subarus.
Right.
All of a sudden he was like, yo, what is this thing?
Why is the roof bending like this?
Yeah. He's like, this car is so cool. So I was like, it's kind of fun.
Right.
Anyway.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So that's the Christmas tradition is you got. Oh, and then you saw Keanu Reeves started copying me.
He did.
I didn't see that.
He hasn't sent me like a note yet or anything. I'm sure he's gonna text me soon. But I mean, like, I posted those pictures and then he did his thing. Oh yeah, like, oh, here's me in my Porsche, which I was like, that's cool. Like, anyways, he'll probably text me soon.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, like, he's just, I guess, what do they call it? The kids, they call it not cred. They get, what is the thing? The social media thing that people are after? Clout. Anyway, I think he was trying to get some of my clout.
I think he's biting your style. Yeah.
I think he feels that I have a lot of clout to spare, which I guess I do. But
that's one thing people always say about Keanu Reeves, just notorious clout chaser.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to help the guy out if it helps him. Maybe he'll get in a movie soon or something.
Get his big break.
Yeah, exactly. I want to help the guy out, so.
Nice. Nice.
Maybe I'll have him on Tempest. Maybe you guys can have him on the show, and you guys should have Keanu Reeves on your show, and you should ask him only nothing else, but just about that.
Just this photo.
And
just an hour-long deep dive on this photo.
When he saw my photos, was he more inspired by the Alpha or by the Peugeot?
Okay, I'm going to open an IMDb Pro account now so I can get a hold of his management.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Smart.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good.
David.
Well, David's general. I believe we did a car show.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Mostly.
Yeah, we absolutely did.
Yes.
We did a car show. Mainly, we talked about one car.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
Good
okay.
David, if people want to see more pictures of your Peugeot or harass you about things that you've said here or put you in touch with Keanu Reeves for legal counsel, how could they get in touch with you?
Well, especially if they want to see more Peugeot pictures, they can follow me on Twitter because I'm very obnoxiously constantly posting pictures of it. Otherwise, yeah, they go to davidobuchowski.com. I also have my short stories, fiction, and my nonfiction essays, links to those. And they can always check out episodes of Tempest, which I'm in pre-production on season 3.
Oh, awesome.
That's so great.
Yeah, my Twitter handle is David O from NJ, as in New Jersey. I think that's pretty much covers it. So, thanks so much for having me on again. This is a lot of fun.
Anytime.
Oh, good. Do you promise? Anytime?
Yes.
Anytime.
Yes.
Cool.
Really. We are struggling for content here. We have no ideas left. We're out.
Oh, good.
Dave, if people enjoyed this, what should they do?
Well, besides doing all the stuff that David said, definitely give his Twitter a follow because it is absolutely delight. You get to, in addition to seeing the Peugeot, you get to see pictures of his insanely handsome cat. So there's that as well, right? Because car Twitter and cat lovers are not mutually exclusive, right?
No.
So if you like all that, tell your friends about the show, subscribe to us on YouTube. Leave us a podcast review. And and if you see a picture of a Peugeot in the wild, or you see a picture of something out there, text it to us, 720-515-1391. That's the Apex Adjacent Crisis line.
Yes.
Yep. Send it to us, right? So that's what should be done.
Thank you again, David, for coming on.
A true pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody else. We love you. Goodbye.